Protests on the street of Moscow, 6 weeks in a row, brought an abrupt end to the Russian parliament's summer recess. MPs held an emergency session and set up an investigative commission.
I'm sure that we must investigate financing from abroad that leads to interference in Russia's internal politics. We must look at the activities of some diplomats who are based on Russian territory. Maybe I'm getting ahead of myself, but I promise you, we will have interesting findings.
The protest started in July after several opposition candidates were barred from running in local elections in Moscow. Election officials said signatures they needed to collect were false. Normally these local elections don't attract a lot of attention, but banning the opposition from taking part motivated tens of thousands to protest. Police have arrested thousands of protesters and some say they were beaten and now face serious criminal charges. This has led many more to take part. To observers it may sound all too familiar. Blaming foreigners for anti-government protests is not only seen as a way to distract Russian public opinion from the real reasons behind the protest, it also portrays these protesters negatively as being used by foreigners. And this could be used to convince people not to join. On his visit to France on Monday, President Vladimir Putin said protesters have a right to let their voice heard, but the authorities will do everything to prevent violence.
I am a guest here and it is not a good place to say that, but I have to since you asked. We all know about the events related to the so-called Yellow Vests, in which about 11 people were killed and 2,500 people, including 2,000 policemen, were injured. We don't want that to happen in Russian capital.
While Russian politicians say the American accusations of Russian meddling in the 2016 presidential elections were false, theirs are real. So it's basically the Russian version of the Mueller investigation?
Well, we don't have a person like Mueller, of course. I hope our result will be better compared to what he has achieved, because he achieved zero, and we will probably find something.
The Parliamentary Commission says it will summon journalists and diplomats it suspects of interference. So far, the US Embassy has been blamed for meddling, as have YouTube and the German channel Deutsche Welle. Vaessen, Al Jazeera, Moscow.